So, Rob, thank you so much for talking to me today.
Joyce, it's my absolute pleasure to be here. I'm thrilled to chat with you.
Awesome. So, for people who may not be familiar with you or your podcast, Peace Talks, can you give us a little bit of an introduction?
Sure. I am a mediocre puzzler who has aspirations for being a less mediocre puzzler. And one of the ways that I thought that I might be able to improve my puzzling would be to talk to people who are actually non-mediocre puzzlers, which is to say some of the world's best puzzlers. And so I started a podcast for a lot of reasons. It's not my first podcast. I've done a few historically, and I've been wanting to get back into it. And talking to people and learning stuff is always a lot of fun for me. But the option of potentially improving my speed puzzling was definitely on there. So I just one day decided that I would start it up. And reached out to, I think originally Andrea Peng, who I had no relationship with. I was just like, "Hey, I'm doing this new thing. Would you be interested?" And she was like, "Absolutely." And away I went. Really, is just started talking to people. It's a podcast really focused on who the interesting people are in the puzzling world, and what they do, how they think about things. Basically anything related to speed puzzling. So it's competitors, it's manufacturers, it's people who put on events, the whole nine yards. And so it has been my joy to talk to now, I don't know, 30 or 40 different people all across the competitive jigsaw puzzling scene, who've just been willing to lend me some of their time so that I could share it with everybody else.
Amazing. And when did you start the podcast?
Good question. So I think I started it after Nationals, I want to say 2024.
Okay.
Um, Somewhere in that area. And I had originally had the idea to do a podcast back when I got into competitive speed puzzling, which would have been
Mhm.
September 2022. But I had heard that there were potentially other folks who might be doing podcasts who already had built-in audiences bigger than me, and I was like, well, I don't need to go there if there's already there. And so I waited a little while. Nobody ever emerged. So I was like, all right, well, let's give it a chance. So it's been a couple of years now. It's been great.
Yeah. So, how did you first hear about competitive speed puzzling?
So my wife and my daughter and I were sort of casual jigsaw puzzlers. Once every month or two, we'd bust out a 1,000-piece puzzle and work through it over the course of a day or two. And always in the back of my mind, there was some idea that let's just time it and see how we do, and like just because it's fun and I like optimizing things, and so it's just another thing to optimize. And I had previously looked for competitive jigsaw puzzling things, just like, is that a thing? And never found it. I don't know if I was just doing my searches wrong or it was the wrong timing. But then one day, my wife and I were reading A.J. Jacobs' The Puzzler book. And A.J. Jacobs, I don't know if you know or your audience knows, but is a person who likes to really get into the head of something. So he did a year of living biblically where he tried to, live all of the biblical laws. And then he did it was like a similar thing around the Revolutionary War era, trying to live like that. I think it was like Constitution or something like that. He read the entire encyclopedia and, sort of talked about his experiences with that. But so he likes it's sort of a gimmick. He likes to fully immerse himself in something and live like that. And so one of his book, The Puzzler, was all about different kinds of puzzle experiences that he had. And I think it's somewhere around chapter 6 is jigsaw puzzling. Um, and he mentions going to the 2019 World Jigsaw Puzzle Championship, um, as the only representative from the United States. And I was like, wait, this is the thing? And my wife and I were both like, this is the thing. And this would have been September of 2022, because we then looked up, and sure enough, the first US Nationals event was happening the very next month. So we were like, well, we got to get on this. We need to start, practicing and working through some process and some strategy. So we went from being, casual puzzlers to being like intense competitive speed puzzlers almost overnight. So that's sort of how we got started. Is that we had sort of this background of interest and then found the catalyzing moment. Worth saying is that we never read another chapter of that book for fear of taking on more hobbies. So, we just we got as far as puzzling, and we were like, okay, that's probably we don't want to toy with it any further.
Yeah, fair. I call it a graveyard of hobbies, and I'm very afraid to pick up any new ones for that same reason. I get very obsessive, and yeah, for sure. Which I think
Yeah,
is true for a lot of puzzlers.
no, seriously, I am much the same. I am a serial hobbyist. I like things intensely for some period of time, and then some things stick and some things don't. So right now, my hobby cup is full, so I don't feel like I need to take on anything else.
Yeah. It's really cool that you and your wife and your daughter puzzle together. Not everyone has a partner to puzzle with. You know what I mean? I think there's a little bit of a mix, but there's a lot of folks where they puzzle, but their partner doesn't, and they just kind of tolerate it or whatever. So, were you both into puzzling when you met each other, or did one of you kind of get the other one into it?
No, as I said, my wife and I have been together for more than 30 years. So the puzzling is a very new phenomenon for both of us. We were the family puzzlers before that, like, people who, like I said, busted out a puzzle periodically. So I don't think that we had anywhere near the intensity that the vast majority of competitive speed puzzlers have these days. We don't have the history. A lot of people have been puzzling since they were as long as they can remember, and intensely so. But we were just people who enjoyed doing the odd puzzle from time to time, and then became really enthralled by the idea of doing it for speed.
Yeah. And you puzzle together, right, as a team, as a pair in competition. So, um, is there ever any conflict? Like, how do you divide responsibilities? What strengths and weaknesses do you have? How do you work with each other?
So we do definitely do pairs and teams together. Although this last nationals, my wife ditched me for somebody else on the pairs front. Fortunately, I was able to partner with Karen Kent, who was a new puzzler as of like November. And when she agreed to sign on with me, I am at the low end of speed puzzling. Like my seat at the first heat this last nationals was 194
Mhm.
out of 200. So you can see where I fit. I mean, I beat my seat by like 15 spaces. I was like 180 something. So, for me,
Amazing.
as being a rock star. But I told Karen, here's where I'm at. You make sure that your mental space is willing to handle, somebody who's not going to propel you into the heights of competitive speed puzzling. And she's like, no, I just started, no problem. It turns out she became really good over the course of our puzzling, not related to me, but like she puzzles a lot. She
Mhm.
sort of picked up some strategies and just started really excelling. So my wife traded me out for somebody better, but it turns out that I also traded my wife out for somebody better. So we both like to say that we moved up. But we do enjoy puzzling together quite a lot. It's a great sort of focused activity. We're both trying to accomplish the same things. Trying to figure out how to do it together is a lot of fun. It's not without its sort of road bumps. As a lot of teams will talk about, sort of when you're puzzling competitively, some of the table talk can be, snipey or angry or whatever, and we definitely, work through some things while we're puzzling. But in general, we both find it a lot of fun, and we've worked on a couple of different teams. We've had a local team here, and then sort of set up things for a more national team. Um, and those have been a lot of fun. I think teams for me, for my wife, and hopefully folks we teamed with, are always a lot of fun because we're all in it for the same mission, but we're all in it at about the same capabilities.
Mhm.
And so it's not like we're all like vying. We don't have the expectation of like winning nationals or really
Mhm.
even qualifying for finals. It's not out of the realm of possibilities, but a lot of the fun is just coming together with a common goal, trying to do it as best as you can amongst a bunch of other like-minded people.
Yeah.
Um, I'm happy to continue to go on about all
No,
that
you're
stuff.
good. Yeah, Teams is super fun. I'm kind of the same vibe, right? I just like I want to have a good time. We're all gonna do the best we can, but we don't want to be super intense about it. By the way, just the bit about you and your wife trading each other out for better people, that's going to be the pull quote for the teaser, out of context. Yeah.
Perfect. She will appreciate that.
Yeah. So I want to dig in a little bit to your podcast background. So I've been curious about that. Like, had you had a
Mhm.
previous podcast background? So what are some of the other things that you did before this?
So the when podcasting first became a thing, and I don't want to get too technical, but there's the RSS feed, which is what delivers content to other places technically, and then at some point, this guy Dave Weiner added the additional ability for to reference a file, and that's how podcast came about. Is like,
Mhm.
here's I can subscribe to your feed, and suddenly I can go fetch a file that you reference on your feed. That happened somewhere in around the 2005 era, and I, for whatever reason, happened to be plugged into it at the time. So I was probably fiddling around with that along with the first 100 or so people. And so I did a lot of experimentation. There were a lot of like it was as with any new technology, it's sort of like there's a moment where it's the Cambrian explosion. Every possible form of something comes into play, and then only some of them survive. And so there was like services that allowed you to call in and have a podcast. You dial on your phone, you'd talk for a little bit, and then it would publish to a podcast feed. There are any number of wild and crazy things that came out of that. So I did a number of podcasts during that time, some of which had a fair amount of traction. Like I did one on sex and sexuality, which had a probably 10,000 subscribers. And in the 2006 era, that was pretty substantial. But then life and other things intervened, and that all sort of went to the wayside. And I really didn't. I always wanted to do more podcasting, and that didn't really raise its head fully until the jigsaw puzzling thing came around, and suddenly I was into it. I wanted to sort of share my journey. I wanted to share the stories of the interesting people I was talking to and share any learnings that I had around competitive jigsaw puzzling as we went. And I keep saying that, I will do this until I've run out of interesting things to talk about. And so far, like I have my whole rest of this year scheduled out. It
Yeah.
seems unlikely to run out anytime soon.
Yeah. And so at this point, having talked to 30 or 40 people, have
Mhm.
you noticed anything in terms of what do the top competitive speed puzzlers or what do the puzzlers that you've talked to have in common?
Yeah. So when I talk to the world's most accomplished competitive jigsaw puzzlers, the thing that I did not expect to find is how much being the world's best or the nation's best or even the locals' best competitive jigsaw puzzle is a mind game. How much of that is not necessarily perfecting your technique, not necessarily perfecting your communication with your partner or anything like that, but how much of it is really dealing with your inner demons, especially in solo versions, right? Because it's
Yeah.
just you and the puzzle, and you need to work through whatever it is that, your feelings of inadequacy or, your concerns that other people are watching you or whatever it is. Those things really become intense in a way that I had no idea. I'm not a professional anything. So I had no idea that, that's probably fairly common in sport, especially individual sport. But I was expecting to primarily talk about like practice and technique and things like that. And we do talk a fair amount about those things. But the thing that keeps coming up over and over again is how much you need to kind of work on getting your head, the voices in your head, so to speak, uh, in sync with how you want to puzzle. Because even the most calm, staid person who is moving deliberately and has like a solid face in front of them and when they finish are like they lean back and they're like, yes, good job. Those people have emotional turmoil going on inside of them that you don't see until you start talking to them and they're like, oh yeah, I was a wreck the entire time. I was talking to Kristen Tuv, and she mentioned world champion a couple of years back now, and she mentioned that one competition she had accidentally touched. I think maybe her first competition, she had accidentally touched the bag that the box was in, and the instructions were don't touch the bag. And despite nothing coming of it, the whole time in her head, she was like, I touched the bag, I screwed things up. It's like,
Hmm.
everybody, and if you watch her, she is just calm personified, right? She just looks like she's here. Why not? There's a puzzle here. I might as well do it.
Yeah.
I could probably do it faster than anybody in the world, but no big deal. But then you talk to her, and you find out that there's this whole thing going on. And when I first talked to her and a couple other people, I was like, oh, this is sort of unique to these people. But no, it is extremely common. So
Yeah.
that is what I was really surprised to find.
I think that's actually probably pretty comforting for a lot of folks to know that, like, if the topmost puzzlers are going through this, then, they're not alone and they're not kind of strange in that process. So, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
and
really interesting.
managing your head is it's a throughout the whole competition sort of problem. Like a
Yeah,
lot of people, like Michaela Keener, like talks about taking breaks, and just any number of people are like, I have to do certain things maybe in prep, or I need to just isolate myself away at some point. So it's not just like once the timer goes off. It's a whole like competition weekend sort of thing.
for sure. Anything else you've kind of learned, even just practical tips or tricks?
I have learned one of the things I was hoping to learn is that if you're a mediocre puzzler like myself, that there is a path for you to achieve greatness. And while I do believe that that is true, much like anything else, you don't practice to become Usain Bolt. Like you sort of are Usain Bolt and then you practice. You're not the world's fastest sprinter because you practiced really hard. Like there's more to it than that. So the best in the world practice hard. They practice intentionally. They explore their options. They work on their mind game. They work on making sure that they are fed and watered at all the right times. They do all of the things. But they are also endowed with a certain set of intrinsic capabilities or traits that allow them to be the best in the world, which in retrospect makes a lot of sense. But when I was first exploring competitive jigsaw puzzling, like the world was there was not a lot of information out there. There was
Mhm.
just like, who would have thought that you would might try to become a competitive jigsaw puzzler? And so, what it would take and how you could do it and who could do it was deeply a mystery to me. And so, I was hoping, gosh, maybe I'll be one of those people who can, with the right strategies and the right practice, could become really good at it. And I'm sure that's still not a possibility, but I put a certain amount of effort into this, and I'm still seated 194th out of 200. So there's something more to it than just intent and practice and knowing skills and what to do. You can definitely improve, no doubt about that, and people improve pretty substantially. Even the best people improve very substantially. I was talking about a puzzler who is I won't talk about who this puzzler is right at the moment, but this puzzler is a nationally like competitive puzzler who has always been really great, but suddenly found a whole other gear. And so even the best puzzlers can find ways of improving themselves. But like the path to become from me to them, maybe not something that we'll actually be able to chart.
Yeah. Well, for yourself, though, do you feel like you have improved upon yourself based on kind of the things that you've learned in practicing?
Yes. The challenge is, and you've experienced this as well, I imagine, Joyce, is that everybody else has improved as well.
Yeah.
Everybody else is learning the tips and tricks. Everybody else is practicing, and it is about practicing. Like you just need to practice if you want to become great. If everybody else is watching everybody else and learning and becoming better, and so what we are seeing is that it can be a lot of effort to stay where you are
Hmm.
because the rest of the tide is rising everywhere. And so I believe I have gotten better, but I haven't gotten as fast as the people around me are getting. Like I can point at my times, which is great. Like this is the one like key takeaway as a sort of individual puzzler, especially if you're not an elite puzzler, but like set your goals against yourself, not the rest of the
Yeah.
world, because like you may improve your times, and I definitely have done that, but you may struggle to surpass the people around you just because
Mhm.
they're doing their thing. So as long as you're doing better, like it's best for you to it is more healthy for you to set your goals relative to yourself than to set it against everybody else. Because again, we are so early in, as much as it seems like jigsaw puzzling, competitive puzzling has been around for a while now, we're so early in our understanding of what the path to great is, that, you may find it, but everybody else around you may find it as well. And so being able to um, to surpass the people around you, like while a laudable goal, definitely something that is hard to not want to do. It can be a hard thing to pin your hopes on.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you're right. I think that if I'd performed the way that I did this year in last year's pool, I would have qualified for finals, but I was not close this year. Yeah, even though I got my best in competition time ever. So,
Well,
yeah.
congratulations for that, though.
Yeah, thank you.
Well
That was
done.
exciting. Yeah.
No, I was immediately going to start interviewing you about this, so I
I was
will.
going to ask, is it hard for you to be in this role? I have the roles
Yeah,
reversed.
absolutely. I believe this is the first time where anybody has asked me any questions. It part of the reason that I am okay at the podcasting that I do is because I just want to know. Like I have
Yeah.
such a powerful drive to understand, and I
Mhm.
want to know the techniques and the strategies and the people. So whenever
Yeah.
I'm talking to a person, I'm like, "Hey, so tell me about what you do." It's just sort of the natural default.
Right.
So when I'm chatting with you, like it's all of my urges are to be like, so tell me what you did, Joyce, to improve, because I would really love to hear that.
We can talk about that another time.
Fair enough. All right.
But yeah, but you're in the hot seat today. I wanted to also kind of talk about the live commentating. So you have been a commentator on several speed puzzling competition live streams now. Was so the Portland Jigsaw Masters, the first one, that was 2024, right? Um, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Was that your first time doing the live commentary at like I guess a live streamed competition?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that it was on the back of that I ended up doing some commentating for the following year's nationals, and then worlds, and then this year's nationals. So
Yeah.
that checks out. And then Portland Jigsaw Masters in the middle of there somewhere else as well. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, fortunately for me, the Portland Jigsaw Masters is in the town in which I live, which is turns out to be a pretty good town for competitive jigsaw puzzling, in that we have a weekly competitive league of sorts here in town. So if you want to compete, like there's every opportunity to do that. And now we're arranging a state level JPA as well, which is great. But yeah, I the that competition happened to happen here in town, and I happen to know the people who are there, and they're like, "Hey, you talk about puzzles. Do you want to talk about puzzles on a live stream?" I'm like, "Sure, I talk about puzzles on a live stream." Um, and so they invited me along, and the it was sponsored by Completing the Puzzle. Um, and the funny thing is that I was talking to my mom afterwards, as one does. One wants to talk to one's mom and sort of reflect on something. And I was like, I had no idea, because I ended up being a co-host of that for the entire, I don't know, probably 14 hours worth of live stream that
Yeah.
had. And I was like, I had no idea I could talk for 14 hours about a topic that I really enjoyed. And my mom was like, "Oh, yeah, you can." Um, so apparently the insight to me was not insight to her. Um,
Yeah. Hilarious. Have you done any sort of live commentating like that before?
No, not even close. I had a lot of trepidation when going into that. I'm like, is this something I can do?
Yeah.
And like it helps that I have a lot of excitement and passion and curiosity around that sort of thing. So I figured, especially if you have a co-host, there's only so bad you can do. Somebody else is going to help sort of carry you along. Like if you have the passion and I have the desire to have express that passion to other people and try and pass that on. So I was fortunate enough that it worked out, and yeah.
Yeah. So how do you prepare to go on live commentary? Because, they sent surveys out for nationals previously asking for information that maybe they might
Hmm.
use on the live streams. Occasionally I do like notice on the live streams y'all are checking notes or referencing like, wait, what was the team name? Things like that. So I'm curious, yeah, like what kind of prep goes into that kind of a gig?
Yeah, well, more so probably for me than many other folks. I have a brain like a sieve, so information comes in and then it immediately flows out, which is great in that it provides a lot of space that I can fill up for new things. Like whenever I'm starting something new, like if I can fill it up with new things, and suddenly like there's a lot of space. But then as soon as I'm done with like a live stream, all of that stuff falls right back out of my head. So there is a fair amount for me of just reminding myself of what's going on. So getting up to speed with like what it is that people have, who's going to be there, what kinds of things they have done. But also one of my abiding passions is data analysis.
Mhm.
And so I like to run some, like, that's another reason that I'm into the podcasting side of things is because I like data and podcasting is a way that I can use that data. But I will go in and look to see like how are people who's been notably performing interesting things over the course of the last say year. And so like I generally have a laptop with information around who's there and some basic stats of various kinds that if I need to reference that I can. It's actually more for me just to remember who like who's got certain sets of skills and who's capable like who are the most likely capable people are out there. Occasionally I will do some stats off of that. Sometimes I have other like personal insight tidbits. So we started doing a couple of years ago. It's funny to say because the podcast is only a couple of years old, but on the podcast we started doing who to watch at nationals, for example, and that was really the brainchild of B. Karen, who is a great puzzler in herself, and a good commentator as well. And she is also just enormously plugged in to the network of puzzlers. And so she will come to a conversation about who to watch with enormous amounts of personal insight around people that I don't have any idea how she gets. But so when I go to a competition, sometimes I'm just like, okay, what has EB said that we can relay? What kinds of interesting things? And then I think mostly what you'll see us looking at is the map of like who's at what table. It is
Mhm.
continues to be the bane of competitive jigsaw commentators to understand who is sitting, who you are looking at because often all you see is some hands. And I've gotten
Mhm.
good at recognizing certain hands, but you don't know what table they're at because nothing tells you until like the audience can see the same thing. So often what we're looking at is like, okay, that's table 16. Who's at table 16, and what do we know about them? So that's often what we're looking at.
Yeah. What other maybe challenges are there, or what are things that you learned from kind of your early experiences in live commentating that you've sort of made adjustments on?
Well, one of the things that, so one is that the stats don't matter as much. Now, it really depends on the competition. So for Portland Jigsaw Masters, I have a lot of control over that because it's sort of my baby. Whereas U.S. Nationals and Worlds, I have less control over because other people are doing that, and you want to fit into how they do some things. So, for example, Nationals tends to be a lot more a kind of storytelling than it is sort of stats based things. Whereas for Portland Jigsaw Masters, like this last year, we actually start 10 minutes before the competition begins to just sort of like talk. We treat it like a sport. Like we talk about, okay, what do we expect to see? What kinds of things we're seeing? But then also we brought in Jacob Palawa, who runs or who is a member of the USJPA's JPAR scoring team.
Hmm.
And so a stats guy. And he would come in with his laptop and show us, a graph or two, and we'd have some time to do that. So depends fairly heavily on what it is that we are like, who you're talking to, what kinds of um, things you bring to it. So in any case, I've learned that I need to adapt to those things. Not everybody wants the deep stats, strangely. Um, but also, my favorite announcer is Jim Eakins. And
Okay.
if folks haven't had a chance to listen to Jim Eakins, they really should. I mean, setting the bar is not uh, kind enough to what it is that he does in the world of competitive jigsaw puzzle commentating. Like he raises the bar in the way that NASA raises like a rocket, right? Like it's just so far above and beyond. And so I take away from like watching him do things. He brings the energy and enthusiasm and really makes you feel caught up in the moment. So I try and bring my my inner Jim to the conversation. But also, he's relentlessly focused on giving praise to the people on the screen.
Yeah.
And not that I don't do that, but it is a good reminder that everybody is trying to do great work. And for most people, for the people they are, the skill they are at the moment they're in, they are doing great work. And he's just relentlessly focused on pointing that out. Like, oh, look at this great thing this person who's in 74th place does. Like, if Jim had seen me at 185th place and didn't know who I was, and I was on camera, you guarantee he would find something nice to say about me. And the competitive puzzling world is, as you know, Joyce, super nice to begin with. So it's not like we're starting from a place of malice. So it is sort of the default is to say nice things, but Jim is an amazing reminder that there's always depth to what you can bring to that kind of conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything I talk about these days is a love fest for Jim, so I apologize for that in advance.
Yeah. And you had him on recently on your podcast with his partner Mari Black, who's also a top competitive speed puzzler. So for anyone who wants to, get to know Jim a little bit more and Mari, you can check out that Peace Talks episode.
And that they are together amazing.
Yes.
Having that conversation, like time just whipped by. Time is never a slog when I'm talking to a puzzler. But we got so I reserved 2 hours for a conversation. And so we got 2 hours into that conversation and really had only gotten through maybe 10% of what I was intending to talk about, just because we went exciting and interesting, unexpected directions. So we will have them back. The goal is to have them back probably sometime midsummer, just to continue the conversation because both Mari and Jim are delightful and interesting in their own ways.
Yeah. Amazing. So I have to ask you about Worlds because that was a very dramatic event last year. So was that your first Worlds that you attended?
It was, and what a one to go to, huh?
Yeah, and to be commentating. Yeah,
Uh,
amazing.
uh, the Fortunately for me, like the good news is that I enjoy commentating. I enjoy hanging out with the other folks who commentate. I love, in part because it gives you a front row view into the action.
Yeah.
Um, and I love that. Like one of the things that competitive jigsaw puzzling just isn't great at yet is um, the experience of the spectator. If you're a I don't know if you spent a lot of time this time at nationals trying to watch some of the competition, but like if you know somebody who's sort of out there in the middle, you can maybe see them, or if they're near the edge, you can hang out near them. But if you want to watch the frontline folks, and I'm always super interested I mean, that is the way sport works, right? We're really interested in seeing how the elite folks do things. It is extremely challenging to see how they do things because like I had to stand in front of the booth and there's a very small window which like eight of us were all lined up against to look straight down the front tables and try and get a sense of what that is. Well, when you're in the commentary booth, you get a front row seat to all of that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's absolutely fun. But in any case, I had the opportunity to do a number of those streams at Worlds. And that was split between the delightful Jim Eakins and the equally delightful Michelle. Am I forgetting Michelle's last name?
Is it Casper?
Um,
Am I making that
yes,
up?
no, Michelle Casper. That's 100% right.
Okay.
Forgive me, Michelle. Michelle Casper is equally amazing. She started the Euro Jigsaw Jam. I have an episode with her as well. You should listen to her story. It's intimidating as much as it is amazing. So the way that she went about starting up the Euro Jigsaw Jam. And anyway, those two split up the commentating between them for the 20 plus live streams that went on during that time. And many of them they did back to back. And one of the many exciting, I will say, portions of the worlds was the weather. And the fact that the climate control inside the Millennium Dome was not really functional. And we have an episode about that as well.
Hmm.
And So it was a physical trial, I would say, being in there. I mean, definitely for the competitors, like absolutely for the competitors, no doubt, but also for the commentators. Like I said, Jim and Michelle were in there for multiple sessions back to back to back to back, often with, not a lot of chance to rehydrate and refuel and any number of other things. So it was hot
Yeah.
the entire time.
Yeah.
And then the most interesting time for me was I think it was a teams round where later in the week where the weather turned from being hot to being less hot, but also raining like you needed an arc. Like
Mhm.
pretty soon the waters were going to raise above where you could do it, where you could stand. And hail and wind. And inside the dome is basically a big plastic shell. So when hail falls on the dome, like it echoes throughout the
Oh,
dome. You can imagine like hail on some sort of plastic container. Like it makes that
right.
noise only a ton. How deep do you want me to go into this story? Because I could probably tell you 10 minutes of this story easy.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious about the moment that basically the live feed cut. And
Hmm.
I did not catch this myself, but I heard about it from other puzzlers who were watching live. The feed cut. And so
Yeah.
people who were watching the live stream were like, "Oh my God, what's going on? Like, what's going on?" And then they mentioned that you were in the chat giving updates on what was going on to keep people informed. So, at what point did you realize that the live feed had cut? Like, how did that come about? And then at what point did you decide, oh, I got to keep the viewers updated and I'm going to keep them updated in chat? Walk me through that.
Yeah. I mean, it's worth saying up front that I was sort of a passenger on this. Like, it wasn't like if this was Portland Jigsaw Masters and I was the one who was responsible for the live feed, I would feel a different way probably than, a person who was invited to come along and, speak. And so, and I like a certain kind of chaos. And so this was the kind of chaos where nobody was really going to get hurt, but was super interesting. And what happened is that all of this weather was happening. There's a I don't know, it was like I don't know 20-foot screen outside that fell over because of the wind. This is a mild Armageddon sort of feel to it, and then the power goes out. And the power goes out, but it's in this dome, which is, like I said, basically a plastic shell, so it lets a lot of light in. So I'm not sure that most of the puzzlers even noticed that the power went out
Mhm.
because there was a lot of light already there. But what it did mean is that the official clock went down, and it meant that our live feed and all the internal everything that runs on any kind of electricity went down. And so I happened to have connected my laptop, which, like I said, I have with me so I can look up stats and sort of things. I'd connected it to my phone for, to get connectivity out of the building because I had previously experienced earlier in the week the fact that the internal Wi-Fi could get really jammed, and so I wanted my own sort of connection there. And so we were unsure as to whether the lights just went out and the feed was still going or what. So I hopped on my laptop and I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to connect to YouTube and see what's there. And I saw that the feed was indeed down, but the chat was still going. And this happened right at the point. So it was during teams. It happened right at the point where the elite teams starting to move from the first puzzle to the second puzzle.
Mhm.
Um, so that's interesting both for the clock purposes, but it's also interesting because that's a key moment in the activity, right? People really want to know who's moved over into the next puzzle and what puzzle they moved over into. And it happened that I was sitting looking right at one puzzler, and they just moved over, and I was like, "Well, I have my laptop here. I will just type that into the thing. This team has just moved over." And
Mhm.
people were like, "Oh, I love that team. That's great." And I had been sitting with Michelle, who had been the host at the time, and I was joining her, and we had a um, a guest who was just about to leave and a new guest who was just about to come on. And the guest Sergio and the new guest Veronica, I believe. Um, like I started typing this in. Michelle had gone walking away to look and see how things are going. And I was starting to type in this, and then I would get up and sort of walk around and bring back information. Well, at some point, Sergio and Veronica were like, "Well, we can help with this," and so they started going off into the audience, and then Michelle had her phone and was live updating from where she was.
Mhm.
So the other two would come back and bring me information. I would type it into the thing, and then the next one would come and bring me information. And then they would go off and find other information. And it felt like again, it's the right kind of chaos. Like nobody's getting hurt. We get to adapt to a new situation. We're
Mhm.
providing a service that people enjoyed. We honestly never read the comments because we were too busy like feeding information into it.
Yeah.
And I knew that as a person who loves spectating on competitive jigsaw puzzling, and a person who has had people that they love involved in the competition and want to know how they're doing, like I would love to know this thing, and there's no other way of getting it right now. So it didn't take very long for us to start doing that. It wasn't necessarily that we thought about it for any particular reason, but all four of us just immediately started falling into various roles of
Yeah.
providing that information. And the funny thing is that I think that that is a moment lost in time because as when YouTube doesn't have a feed, it turns out, I learned this after the fact, that if there's no video feed, the chat doesn't stay either. That whole section gets cut
Oh.
after the in the archive of it. So none of that exists anymore. At least it didn't last time I looked. So I wanted to go back and see how did our commenting do? How did people
Hmm.
react to that? Like I saw people mostly reacting with joy, so that was great. But I didn't actually ever get to witness what it is that people said during that time. So in a weird sort of way, it was a moment that we got to experience together, and it was gone.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just oral
just
history.
yeah, and just to sort of tidy that whole thing up. The funny thing is that at some point the power comes back on, and the clock had been on for a little while. They fixed that problem pretty quick, and the live stream got up and running, and we all sort of settled back into where we were. And I am still to this day not sure that very many puzzlers ever noticed that anything was going on because then, after a while they start filtering back to us to do interviews on the live stream, and we're like, what did you think of the power? And they were like, oh yeah, I thought something strange was going on. But almost none of them really even noticed. Even some of them didn't even notice the hail that was banging on the roof. It's interesting that for a certain class of people, once they get into the zone, like
Yes.
they're unreachable in
Yeah.
a way. Like they're in the zone, they're in their happy place, they're in a flow, like they're doing the thing that they love, and gosh, nothing's going to get in the way of that.
Yeah. That sounds very peaceful. I would love to experience that kind of state.
Do you not experience a flow state, Joyce?
I mean, to a degree, but I feel like I always have like the head on a swivel, like one ear to the
Mm.
ground, something like it's hard for me to just, completely immerse into something.
I was watching Hannah Doyle, who was second place this year in individuals at nationals, and second place last year by a second difference from the 1 year to the next. So she was only 1 second difference this year than she was last year. It was 1 second better. So I told her I expect that she will just keep getting 1 second better every year, and then in a couple of thousand years, she will be setting times that nobody can reach. Um, but I was watching her do the speed run. And the speed run, for those people who don't know, is a puzzle that the USA JPA puts out that you can practice as much as you want, enter as many times as you want, and the goal is to try and get to the fastest time over the course of the year, like the fastest time at the end of the year. And they had sort of a showcase, if you will, of those people, anybody who wanted to bring that puzzle in and sort of compete. The official time had already been set a few days before. They could come in and do it, and some amazing times were set. Like if you want to see an individual complete a 500-piece puzzle in under 20 minutes, like you can. It's just crazy. But I was watching Hannah Doyle on the team that she was a part of, the Girls in STEM team, and you could see and she's talked about this, that the moment the timer started, they sorted things out. They, her rest of her team sorted, like along with her, sorted a section to her, and the world closed away. You could see that she was not paying attention to anything else in the world. Like she was hyper focused. Like that pile of pieces was her everything in that moment. And then she finished, she knocked it out extremely quick, and then sort of got back and looked around and had to reorient to the world. All right, what's going on? Because she was like we were talking about, like she was so focused that nothing else in the world like really can penetrate into that. It was
Mhm.
amazing to watch.
Yeah. That is very cool. It is really beautiful to see someone so immersed and so focused on the thing that they excel at or they love. Like I love watching people who are in that state for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I am not that person. I think it sounds like maybe I am more like you. Like I cannot, like if there's 10 things to pay attention to, I have to pay attention to all of those things, which means I'm not paying attention to many of them very well. So if you could, the ability to tune absolutely everything out, not a skill I have.
Yeah, same. Although I think that's actually that sort of paying attention to everything is probably advantageous for like live commentating or things like that, where you really have to, be able to catch everything and pivot in the moment. So, hey,
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Most things have they giveth and they take away.
Yes.
It is amazing. It was amazing for me to watch, especially the first few times, Val Coit doing live commentary because she is. You don't see this when you're watching her, but she is doing the commentary. She's paying attention to who's at what table and what how they're doing. She is watching the live stream commentary as that's going by, and she's picking up pieces and talking about it, but she's also got the production going on in her
Yeah.
head. So everything that is going on with all of the cameras and all the people and all the chatter about like where the logistics is all going on in her head simultaneously. And if you looked at her, you would not think that she was contending and filtering and dealing with all that stuff. And when the camera is not on her, occasionally you'll see her hit a button and talk to the production staff. So it's not like it's just sort of whizzing by her. It's like
Hmm.
she is everywhere all at once.
Yeah. Yeah. She actually mentioned that on the live stream this year. She was mentioning, oh, yeah, I've got the production folks in my ear and they're making jokes and I want to like joke with them. And I just thought like, oh yeah, I didn't even think about that. And the fact that she's able to juggle all those things, like I could not do that. Yeah.
Yeah, deeply impressive.
Incredible. Yeah. Well, Rob, I could talk to you for hours, but I want to
Same.
kind of just
I
watch the
mean, it
time
helps
here.
that you're just asking me questions, so I get to talk for hours. But I do appreciate getting to hang out with you for a bit, Joyce.
Yeah, you too. Just to close out, is there anything else that you just kind of want to share or tell the puzzling community before we wrap?
Wow, it feels like I should have something profound to say, but no. I think the only thing I can say is go check out Peace Talks. I think that if you are into the world of competitive jigsaw puzzling, we don't pull any punches. We talk in nerdy depth about everything that we can talk in nerdy depth about. It is great if you're listening to or if you're doing a puzzle. It's great background to have, but really the people that I talk to and the people in the puzzling community in general are just uniformly amazing. Like they're interesting, they're quirky in their own ways, they're thoughtful, they're uniformly nice. So go listen to Peace Talks not because you'll be listening to me, but because those people are amazing. And I would especially say like go listen to the one that I did recently with Lauren, another last name I'm suddenly forgetting. Um, Heck,
Counts?
yeah,
Counts?
yes,
Lauren counts?
yes, Lauren Counts. Thank you. Um, she is so much like she is fun in person, but she's one of the many like a lot of puzzlers are sort of reserved.
Mhm.
Um, in that episode, she is just a blast. She is hilarious, and a lot of fun to listen to. So I would say go listen to her, but all of the people are amazing. Go talk to the people in your puzzling community. They're all amazing. And you're probably amazing if you're watching or listening to this. So people should talk to you as well. So that's, I guess, all I really have to say on that front.
I love it. Well, thanks so much, Rob. Appreciate it. And I will talk to you later.
Thanks, Joyce.
Bye.